Hey guys, tonight we set sail into the blistered, barnacle-crusted world of real-life pirates. Not the dashing rogues from fairy tales or Hollywood fantasies. No, this story peels back the rotten planks and shows you what it was actually like to live, sleep, eat, and very nearly die aboard a pirate ship in the golden age of piracy. Over the next 19 nights, we're diving deep into every putrid detail. The filth, the food, the fights, the fashion, or lack thereof, and why the biggest threat to your life wasn't a cannonball. It was probably your own pants. If you've been enjoying these sleepy history dives, I'd really appreciate a quick like or subscribe. It truly helps more than you know. And if you're listening from somewhere not infested with sea lice, drop a comment and let us know. It's always wild to see where folks are tuning in from. Now dim the lights, steady your stomach, and let's drift off into tonight's maritime misadventure. You're not a captain. You're not feared, famous, or even fully aware of what port you last saw. You're simply alive, barely, aboard one of the filthiest, loudest, most unpleasant pirate vessels scraping across the Caribbean in the early 1700s. You awaken, not from rest, but from a damp, rocking, headache-filled coma. Your bed is a damp rope hammock, slung like a hammock-shaped regret between two beams that leak when it rains, which is always. There are bite marks on your ankle, probably rats, possibly a fellow crew member. The air is a medley of sweat, gunpowder, urine, and unwashed dreams. Every breath feels like licking the inside of an old boot. Above you, feet thud across the deck, mingled with the distant scream of gulls and someone vomiting with theatrical passion over the starboard side. You rise, or attempt to. The deck lurches, a barrel rolls past. You brace yourself against a splintered beam and make your way to the upper deck, careful not to trip over the cook's pet chicken, who has learned to peck ankles on sight. Breakfast today is a handful of damp biscuits so hard they could be repurposed as weapons. You gnaw like a beaver. You don't ask what's in them. No one does. The ship rocks and creaks like an old man cursing the sky. Salt spray lashes your face. You feel less like a human and more like a pickled root vegetable slowly softening in seawater. Your clothes have fused to your body. Your boots contain ecosystems. Hygiene is not just neglected, it's feared. Like bathing might summon Neptune's wrath. Your job? Unclear. Possibly swabbing the deck. Possibly hauling rigging. Possibly just staying out of the way while avoiding death. Tasks are assigned via shouting, threats, or vague hand gestures. You nod at everything and hope no one asks you to climb anything taller than your confidence. The captain, or someone claiming to be, screams obscenities into the wind while sharpening a cutlass with his shoe. Or maybe it's someone else's shoe. Ownership is a loose concept here. You overhear plans for a raid. Maybe. Or it could be an argument about who stole the last decent scrap of tobacco. The line between strategy and tantrum is razor thin at sea. Below deck it's darker than a cave full of guilty secrets. You descend to fetch water, which is stored in barrels that double as breeding grounds for floating sludge and a faint whisper of rum. You drink it anyway. It's that or the rainwater collected in someone's hat. Hydration is a choose-your-own-adventure. Your shipmates are a symphony of ailments. Rashes, boils, tooth infections so dramatic they deserve their own mutiny. The ship's doctor, a man who may have once seen a medical textbook from a distance, prescribes rum, salt, or sawing something off. You avoid eye contact and pretend your weird cough is just sea charm. As the sun blisters down and the wood beneath your feet burns like guilt, the smell intensifies. Human beings were not meant to live like this. You stink. The ship stinks. Even the seagulls seem offended. You fantasize about soap like a man lost in the desert dreams of water. But the only thing resembling a bath is falling overboard, and the last guy who did that was never seen again. Probably not by choice. Night comes. You curl back into your hammock, cradled by creaking wood and muffled snores. You itch. Everywhere. Something moves in your sleeve. You don't investigate. Sleep creeps in, not like a gentle lullaby, but like unconsciousness finally winning a long battle with discomfort. And still, This is better than many alternatives. The pay is terrible, the risk is constant, but the freedom, the idea of freedom is intoxicating. And for a moment, as the ship rocks you like a seasick cradle and someone farts in their sleep, you think, maybe this was worth it. Maybe, but then you remember you have to climb the rigging tomorrow, and the guy who climbed it last, still up there, no one wants to go fetch him. Welcome to pirate life. You've already got scurvy. There's no such thing as a good night's sleep on a pirate ship. Just different shades of unconsciousness, all of them moist. You don't have a bed. What you have is a plank, and not the dramatic kind used for executions. No, this one's your personal splinter-rich slab of misery wedged between barrels of pickled fish and a rope that smells suspiciously like old teeth. You lie down, if you can call it that, contorting your body into a question mark to avoid a leaking knot in the wood that drips salt water directly onto your eyelid. The ship groans like it's haunted, which it might be, and rocks violently in ways that suggest Poseidon has a personal grudge against your rib cage. Every tilt of the hull sends your internal organs rearranging like badly stacked fruit. Sleep doesn't arrive. It ambushes you sometime after your fourth full-body shiver. You dream of being warm, of lying on dry land, of breathing air that doesn't reek of fish oil, sweat, mildew, and something no one's been able to identify since the last port. But then the ship lurches, a rat scurries across your forehead, and you're reminded this isn't a dream, this is your bunk. Welcome to luxury. There are no pillows. If you're lucky, you can ball up a damp shirt and pretend. If you're unlucky, that shirt turns out to be someone else's, and it's moving. Lice are the default setting. Fleas are a bonus feature. You scratch without thinking, carving tiny trenches into your skin that you will later salt, unintentionally, with the air itself. The sounds are constant. Snoring, groaning, tooth grinding. Someone in the corner is talking in their sleep. Not words, just angry mumbling, possibly in Latin. Chains clink, feet shuffle, and every so often someone lets out a fart so powerful it doubles as a distress signal. You pretend it's thunder. You try different positions, curled up like a terrified shrimp, flat like a human doormat, on your stomach, on your back, on your soul. Nothing helps. The plank is always too hard, the space too tight, and the air too chewy with humidity and regret. You'd sleep on the deck if it weren't covered in bird droppings and salt-crusted mystery goo. When the storms come, and they do often, sleep becomes an act of violence. The ship bucks and kicks like it's trying to shake you off. Water sloshes below deck in ways that suggest no one knows what bilge management means. Your blanket, a term used generously, is soaked through by dawn, and you wake up wondering if your legs are still attached. But sleep you must. Pirates don't get sick days, and exhaustion, while romantic in ballads, is less appealing when you're expected to climb rigging with arms that feel like wet noodles. So you adapt. You learn to nap while sitting, to doze with one eye open, to accept that every rest will be interrupted by shouting, splashing, or something falling onto your foot. Sometimes it's a barrel, sometimes it's a person. You get used to sleeping through cannon fire, not because you're brave, because you're tired. That's the difference between pirates and heroes. Heroes choose danger. Pirates choose nothing. They collapse into it. And still, even amid the rocking, the stench, the lice, the rats, the soggy boots drying 3 inches from your nose, there's a strange peace to it. A rhythm, the creak of wood, the hiss of waves, the knowledge that everyone else is just as miserable as you are. There's a kind of equality in suffering, an unspoken agreement that nobody's winning here. Not the captain, not the cook, not the guy who insists on singing sea shanties at 3 a.m. about his favourite goat. Especially not him. So you close your eyes, you wrap your arms around whatever hasn't been chewed through by mould, you breathe in the murk, and you drift off, not into sleep, but into the half-conscious stupor of someone whose body gave up before their brain could vote. And that, more or less, is how you sleep aboard a pirate ship. Badly, briefly, and often face first into a crate of turnips. Now you learn what it means to eat pirate cuisine, and spoiler, it's not great. You're hungry. You're always hungry, really. It's less of a feeling now and more of a state of being, like being wet, or itchy, or vaguely aware of your own mortality. There's no such thing as full aboard a pirate ship, only different degrees of disappointed. This morning's breakfast is waiting in a wooden barrel near the galley fire, a meal so offensively beige that it seems colour itself has given up. You approach it like a condemned prisoner approaching a blindfold. You already know what it is. You already know how it's going to taste. But still, hope flickers. Maybe today's portion won't crunch when you bite it. Spoiler, it does. That's not seasoning, that's weevils. Yes, you're eating bugs again. Not with your food, as your food. The biscuit, if it can still be legally called that, is known as hard tack. It is in essence flour, water and spite. Twice baked until it could legally qualify as a weapon. Each bite is a risk assessment. Is it worth the dental trauma? Will you still have molars after this? The weevils at least add protein and crunch. Horrifying, protein-rich crunch. You break the biscuit in half, using a cannonball because that's easier than your hands, and inspect the inside. Tiny legs wiggle in the dry cracks. You stare. They stare back. You eat it anyway. Because the alternative is salt pork, which sounds fine until you remember it's been soaking in a barrel of brine for 3 months, stored somewhere between the cannonballs and the bilge water. It jiggles in a way meat probably shouldn't. You poke it. It pokes back. The fat is yellow. The smell is pink. One piece looks like it's developed a personality. Still, you slice off a slab, dunk it in grog to kill the taste, and chew it with the resignation of a man who's accepted his fate. It's either this or scurvy, and honestly, you're not sure which is worse. Meals are communal events, not in a cheerful pass-the-potatoes way, but more like an unspoken contest to see who can finish eating without gagging. There's no privacy, no manners, and certainly no napkins. The floor is your table, your shirt is your plate, and the side of the ship is your sink. Some pirates try to spice things up by adding whatever dried herbs they manage to smuggle aboard. Others just douse everything in rum and pretend it's soup. You once saw a man gnaw on a rope soaked in beef drippings and call it jerky. You didn't judge him, you understood. And if you're lucky, if Neptune smiles upon you, the cook might serve up a stew. Now, stew is a generous term. It's more of a surprise bucket. You never know what's in it. Could be beans. Could be the last rat someone caught. Could be leftover salt pork, grey peas, pickled onions, or a fish head someone found drifting nearby. Once, it was just rainwater and hope. The cook, a man whose culinary training consists entirely of not dying, ladles it into bowls with all the enthusiasm of someone doling out portions of lava. You sit on the deck, bowl in hand, staring at a spoonful of something that might have once been nutritious. You swallow, chew, and pray. Your body doesn't revolt by morning. Snacks? There are none, unless you count dried peas, which you don't, old cheese, which sweats in the sun, or the occasional mouthful of tobacco you pretend is lunch. Fruit's a myth. Vegetables are extinct. The only fresh item you've had in weeks was a flying fish that accidentally landed on deck and was immediately turned into ceviche, by which you mean eaten raw and whole before it could flap away. And let's talk about grog, the lifeblood of pirate hydration. It's technically a drink if you ignore its tendency to strip paint and stun barnacles. Grog is a mixture of cheap rum, water, and sometimes citrus or spices when the quartermaster feels generous. Read never. You drink it to stay hydrated. You drink it to forget your teeth are falling out. You drink it because the water alone would probably kill you faster. Fresh water, you see, turns into something resembling pond scum after a few weeks in a wooden barrel. It gets slimy. It gets chunky. It develops a smell that suggests it's plotting something. So naturally you lace it with alcohol and pretend everything's fine. Every now and then the ship raids a port or takes over a merchant vessel. And oh, the feasts that follow. Cheese. Eggs. Fresh bread. You and your crewmates gorge yourselves like rabid raccoons at a wedding buffet, only to spend the next 2 days in intestinal hell. Your body, confused by real nutrition, revolts. The latrine bucket gets a workout, so does the sea. But those days are rare. Most days it's biscuit, pork, bean sludge, repeat. Over and over until the mere thought of variety becomes suspicious. You once dreamed of a banana and woke up crying. And then there's the problem of rationing. You're not alone on this boat. 40 men, 1 barrel of pickled fish, and no sense of portion control. Food theft is common. Fights break out. You once caught someone licking your biscuit while you weren't looking. You let it go. You understood. Because out here, in the middle of the sea, hunger does strange things to a man. You start imagining seagulls as drumsticks. You sniff the air and think, is that stew? Or just mildew and wishful thinking? Either way, you'll eat again at sunset, same as always, same biscuit, same pork, same gritted teeth and polite muttering of, at least it's not alive. Yet somehow, you survive. You adapt. You accept that food isn't for pleasure anymore. It's for not dying. For staying strong enough to man the sails, to lift a cutlass, to dream of better meals on some mythical shore. And if you're really lucky, maybe next week you'll find a barrel that hasn't gone sour. Maybe the weevils will take a vacation. Maybe the stew will taste less like shoe water, but probably not. So for now, you chew. You swallow. You burp gently and try not to think about what you just ingested. Because tomorrow it's biscuit again. You're lying flat on a wooden deck, sticky with old salt, seagull droppings, and a fine layer of unidentifiable goo that might have once been squid. Your back aches, your teeth ache, your soul aches, but most importantly your head aches, because you're experiencing a rare, devastating and entirely communal crisis aboard this ship. The rum is gone. This isn't just a bad day. This is a catastrophe, a nautical tragedy, the maritime equivalent of a barn fire in a hayloft full of orphans. You're in the middle of the Caribbean, 3 weeks from port, and somehow the last barrel of rum has vanished. Not been rationed, not spoiled, not lost in a storm. Just empty, tapped dry, scraped clean. You know this because someone licked the inside of the barrel like a desperate raccoon and then passed out inside it. You were already sailing dangerously close to madness on a good day, and this is not a good day. This is a day of reckoning. See, on a pirate ship, rum isn't a luxury. It's a medical treatment, a morale booster, and a food group. It's how you sterilise wounds, soothe infected gums, kill whatever's living in your water, and forget about that festering toe that might not be your toe anymore. It's also the only thing preventing half the crew from throwing the other half overboard just for looking weird. With no rum, your already thin grip on sanity begins to unravel like a badly knotted rope. Water. Technically, yes, you have barrels of that. But those were filled before the voyage, which means you now have a delightful assortment of green-tinged rainwater, floating algae chunks, and what you're 40% sure is a mosquito larva convention. It smells like something that died of boredom and fermented out of spite. And food? You still have some of that. If you count salted fish, the texture of barn roof shingles and hardtack biscuits that legally qualify as blunt weapons. Your diet is now a contest of willpower, teeth strength and selective amnesia. Every bite is a gamble between vaguely edible and surprise maggot. Without rum, there are no toasts, no slurred sea shanties, no midnight debates about whether that cloud looks like a mermaid or a haunted ham. The deck is quiet. Too quiet. The crew doesn't talk now. They glisten. Sweat drips. Eyeballs twitch. The absence of rum hangs in the air like a wet blanket made of regret and crushed dreams. You try to distract yourself. You tie knots. You untie knots. You stare at the horizon and pretend the gulls aren't laughing at you. You clean your fingernails with a fishbone and wonder if that sore on your leg is part of a bigger problem, or just your new aesthetic. But the craving is there. Not just for alcohol, for anything that feels slightly less grim than the current state of your existence. It doesn't help that the captain has begun muttering to his boots. The chain of command, such as it is, has started to erode. Pirate democracy is a beautiful idea, until it turns into pirate anarchy. With no rum to bribe, cheer, or sedate the masses, you start to notice long silences during meals, quick glances, hands lingering too long near knives. Suspicion blooms like mildew in a damp sailcloth. People are getting ideas, dangerous ones, like rationing the tobacco, or worse, watering down the vinegar to make it stretch. These are not solutions, these are war crimes. One bold soul suggests fermenting fruit scraps to make emergency grog. A noble effort. Unfortunately, the only available fruit is one blackened lemon, a handful of raisins, and half a banana that's more liquid than solid. The resulting concoction is so foul, even the shiprats file a formal complaint by dragging it into a corner and peeing on it in protest. You try to remember what dry land is like. You imagine bread that doesn't fight back, a bed that doesn't rock like a cursed cradle, a toilet that isn't just the edge of the boat and a prayer. But these are distant fantasies. Right now, your reality is a damp shirt, a sunburn in the shape of a spoon, and a tongue so dry it sounds like sandpaper when you blink. Morale continues to plummet. The daily fights escalate. A full-blown brawl breaks out over a single clove. Not a bag, a clove. You break it up by yelling something about scurvy, which is ironically more terrifying than any actual threat because half the crew's gums are already bleeding, and nobody wants to know how bad it is. To pass the time, someone invents a game involving dead fish, a broken spoon, and increasingly desperate wagers. You win a splintered fork handle. It becomes your most prized possession. And then, just when you think the mutiny is imminent, salvation. A shout from the crow's nest, land, barely a speck on the horizon, but it's there, a place, a chance, a possibility that someone somewhere might have a fresh barrel waiting. The energy on deck shifts instantly. Bodies that were slumped like boiled seaweed now snap upright. Eyes gleam, jaws clench. You're not even sure what's on that island. It could be rocks, it could be angry natives, it could be haunted parrots. But you're prepared to sprint across coral just for the chance that someone there has liquor. The ship turns, the sails catch, the crew works in frantic silence, fueled not by duty, not by honour, but by sheer, sweaty, liver-driven hope. It doesn't matter what happens next, whether you reach land or wreck on the reef, whether the barrel is full or it's just vinegar mislabelled in an act of divine cruelty. What matters is movement, action, the illusion of control in a world where everything smells like feet, and your only toothbrush was lost overboard 3 weeks ago. You've learned something today. You've learned that a pirate without rum is still a pirate. Just sadder, more bitey, slightly more prone to singing sea shanties in minor keys while weeping softly into a biscuit. And you've learned that survival isn't always about bravery or strength. Sometimes it's just about keeping your madness quieter than the guy next to you. Your skin is a battlefield, not the metaphorical kind. No, you're engaged in a very real, very personal war against an ever-expanding colony of lice that have declared your body their sovereign territory. These aren't just any lice. These are 18th century pirate ship lice, hardened, salt-resistant, and alarmingly organised. You suspect they've formed a union. You didn't choose this war. No pirate signs up for the itch. But the moment you stepped aboard the Sour Mercy, you became a host. Not for glory, not for treasure. For a population explosion of wingless parasites that have more political control over your scalp than you do. The problem is compounded by the fact that bathing, actual full-body bathing, is something you haven't done since the Queen had her last birthday. Fresh water is precious cargo on a pirate ship. It's not used for scrubbing armpits, it's used for drinking, bribery, and the occasional emergency when someone eats bad turtle stew and needs a holy rinse. So you scratch, constantly, relentlessly, with one hand on your cutlass and the other down your collar. You're not alone in this. The entire crew itches in unison. At night, the ship doesn't creak so much as it scratches. The sound of nails on skin is a permanent backdrop, like waves, wind, and the subtle whimper of a man whose backside has been chewed raw by invisible invaders. Some try to fight back. The clean freak of the crew, a man who once claimed to have washed his feet in a bucket of rum, attempted a delousing with vinegar and gunpowder. He now has no eyebrows. Another tried the fire method. He also has no eyebrows, but now the rats avoid him, which is considered a social win. You, on the other hand, have opted for the traditional approach. Complain bitterly and hope for rain. Now here's the thing about lice aboard a pirate vessel. They don't just live on people. They evolve. They adapt. They begin nesting in the sails, hiding in the seams of trousers, setting up multi-generational strongholds in the folds of your neckerchief. You once caught one using your earlobe as a hammock. It waved. But the tipping point isn't the itching. It's not even the fact that a fellow crewmate swears he felt one whisper a threat in his ear. No, it's the scabies outbreak. The scabies incident, as it will later be known among the small circle of survivors with intact memories, begins innocently. A rash, a couple of red bumps, maybe some fever, nothing dramatic. But in the closed, festering ecosystem of a pirate sloop where hygiene is optional and clothes are rarely changed, it spreads faster than rum at a mutiny. You now have crewmates comparing lesions like they're trading cards. Some wear gloves to sleep. Others sleep on the deck, convinced the hammocks have become sentient and vengeful. One unfortunate soul swears he found a tick in his grog. It might have been a raisin, but no one is willing to take that gamble anymore. The quartermaster, ever practical, proposes a delousing day. Everyone is ordered to strip, scrub themselves with sand and seawater, and stand in the sun like angry scabbed lizards, while their clothes are boiled over an open flame. The smell is vivid. Picture wet dog, spoiled fish, and burning despair. Now imagine that on a breeze you can't escape. To make things worse, the captain, who hasn't bathed since the War of the Spanish Succession, refuses to participate. Lice are loyal, he says. They only stay on the worthy. By this logic, you're all extremely worthy. Of course, boiling clothes has consequences. The ship's rigging is now temporarily replaced with someone's pants. Shirts shrink. Underwear fuses to itself. You're left with one soggy sock and a pair of breeches that could legally qualify as shorts. You've never felt more exposed or more itchy. And then, finally, the rain comes. Not a drizzle. A biblical, sky-splitting, thunder-rumbling downpour that slams the deck like the gods themselves are trying to flush you. You rejoice. The crew dances. A man washes his teeth. A rat takes a bath. It is the most collective hygiene you've seen since the ship left port 6 months ago. You take off your shirt, let the rain pummel your scalp, and for the first time in recent memory, feel something resembling clean. The lice are probably just retreating deeper into your chest hair, but for now, it feels like a victory. Of course, the joy is short-lived. The rain stops, the sun returns, the itch comes back stronger, emboldened, rejuvenated, possibly angry. You find a new bite in your belly button. The man next to you starts muttering to his shoulder. Someone proposes a full-body oiling as a defensive measure. You decline. You learn to live with it. All pirates do. The scabs harden. The lice adapt. The rash becomes a part of you. A second skin of historical consequence. Historians might call it trench foot of the torso. You call it life at sea. Because this is the reality behind the myth. Not the treasure, not the glory. Just you, a pile of mouldy rags, and a scalp that belongs to at least 4 different life forms. And if you ever make it back to shore, if you survive the storms, the sea battles, the spoiled meat, and the cursed monkey paw currently tied to the helm, you swear you will never again wear the same pair of socks for more than 3 days in a row. Assuming you can still feel your feet by then. There are many things you might have expected to struggle with aboard a pirate ship. Sea monsters, sword fights, the existential dread of watching your crewmates play dice with human teeth. But you were not prepared for the most humbling and universally degrading ritual on the high seas, going to the bathroom. It starts with a feeling, the kind of gurgle that warns you something treacherous is brewing below deck. You try to ignore it. You try to focus on coiling rope, or pretending you understand how sails work. But the human body is a tyrant, and eventually you must face the truth. You need to relieve yourself, which means it's time to visit the rope. See, there is no latrine on this ship, no cosy outhouse, no wooden bench with a hole and a splash of privacy. There is instead a thick rope knotted off the side of the vessel, swaying with the motion of the sea like a cursed invitation. Pirates call it the seat of contemplation, but that's generous. It's a dangling death trap, slick with salt, creaky with use, and positioned over nothing but endless ocean. The ritual is simple. Climb down, grip the rope like your dignity depends on it, because it does. Hang your pale, sea-chilled buttocks over the void, and do your business while praying the wind doesn't slap it back at you. Bonus points if you don't drop your breeches or your soul in the process. Balance is everything. So is speed. You have exactly 45 seconds before the next wave tries to baptize you in Poseidon's mouthwash. Too slow and you'll be sopping wet in places that were never meant to be salty. Too fast and, well, you don't want to talk about what happened to Slippery Tom. The crew pretends not to look. This is a lie. Everyone looks. Pirate entertainment options are limited, and your backside dangling over the sea like a pale moon-shaped lantern is the closest thing to theatre they've had in weeks. You hear laughter. You hear bets being placed. One man claims to have seen your soul escape. Another is sketching you with charcoal. Now sometimes it's not just about you. Sometimes the sea adds a bit of chaos. A sudden gust of wind. A rogue wave. A flying fish with a death wish. You lurch. The rope swings. You scream, but only inside because dignity is a delicate illusion. You swear the ocean is mocking you. It knows. It feels you. And it sends a perfectly timed wave to smack your exposed parts like a wet insult. You gasp. The crew cheers. Someone claps. You're officially the day's entertainment. But don't think it's just bowel business that's a problem. Urination is no walk in the crow's nest either. Unless you're willing to lean over the edge with questionable aim and worse balance, your only real option is the pee bucket. The problem with the pee bucket is that it is communal, and no one empties it until it's at full slosh. You don't even want to talk about the bucket slosh. At night, you try to use the bucket discreetly. But everything's slippery in the dark, and if you've ever tried squatting in a tilted, moving room while sleep-deprived and mildly scurvied, you'll understand why the bucket sometimes ends up on someone's hammock. Which brings us to the olfactory nightmare that is below deck. The stench is a blend of sweat, seawater, grog farts, and the unmistakable aroma of neglected digestion. It smells like the inside of an armpit that lost a bet. You've tried getting used to it. You've tried breathing through your mouth. But now your mouth tastes like the air, and the air tastes like regret. Some pirates have coping strategies. One wears a soaked cloth over his nose. It smells like rum and old cabbage, which is somehow better. Another chews cloves constantly, not because it helps, but because he likes spitting them at rats. The rats have adapted. They now wear eye patches and challenge him to duels. And then there's the vomit. Seasickness is not glamorous. There is no warning. One moment you're fine, the next your guts are staging a revolution. The official chum rail, the side of the ship where everyone's expected to puke, is coated in a crust of old meals and shame. It's slippery, cursed, and often already occupied. You once had to politely wait your turn to hurl. That was the most civilized thing that's happened on this boat. But the worst of it isn't the stench, or the shame, or even the freezing splash that occasionally kisses your cheeks mid-poo. It's the knowledge that this is normal, that for months at sea, this is your life. Your kingdom is a rope, a bucket, and a faint hope that the wind blows the right direction next time. And still, no one talks about it. Pirates sing about gold, blood, and glory. No one composes ballads about the bucket shuffle or the swing of shame. But it's here, in the silent rituals of waste management, that you truly understand what it means to live hard, sail rough, and smell like fermented socks. One day, when you return to land and someone invites you to a tavern with indoor plumbing, you'll weep. You'll whisper thank you to the chamber pot like it's a long-lost friend. You'll kiss the floor of an outhouse. Because after months of fighting wind, waves, and the humiliation of public defecation, you'll know one thing for certain. The true treasure was a quiet toilet all along. You were promised glory, adventure, gold coins clinking in a chest, and the occasional dramatic sword fight against some aristocrat with a powdered wig. What you were not promised, and certainly did not emotionally prepare for, was the swarm of twitchy, whiskered, four-legged nightmares currently performing an unholy symphony beneath the floorboards of your hammock. Rats. Not a few, not even a concerning number. We're talking infestation. Population. Absurd. And they're not the cute storybook kind with waistcoats and tiny teacups. These rats are the hardened criminals of the rodent world. Scarred, aggressive, and louder than most of the crew during rum rations. You've seen one drag an entire biscuit across the deck. You've seen another gnaw through a boot while it was still on someone's foot. They don't fear you. If anything, they view you as a slightly inconvenient roommate who hasn't yet learned the rules of the ship. Rule 1, everything is theirs. Rule 2, see Rule 1. And the worst part? Everyone else has accepted this. The ship's carpenter claims rats keep the ghosts away. The cook insists the occasional tail in the stew adds marrow richness. One of the older pirates even refers to a particularly round rat as Captain Cheesebelly, and claims he saw it vote during the last leadership dispute. You, however, are not yet desensitized. Your hammock creaks. The wood below scratches. Somewhere beneath the barrel of pickled onions, something squeaks in Morse code. Probably plotting. You shift uncomfortably, trying not to think about how many of your nightly itches are caused by fleas and how many by pores. You tell yourself you'll fix this. Make a stand. Set traps. Assert dominance. That's what a real pirate would do, right? Wrong. Because this isn't a story about pirates conquering rodents. This is about pirates learning to live in tense mutual loathing with them. And when the rats inevitably win a skirmish, say stealing an entire candle mid-burn, you simply nod and adjust. Maybe light a backup candle. Maybe sleep with your boots on. Because this is their ship too. At night the rats are loud. Not background noise loud. More like tiny jackhammer tap dancing on tin mugs loud. They scrap, they squeal, they hold what sounds suspiciously like council meetings in the bread hold. One of them has learned to open sacks, another drags a knife. A knife! You're pretty sure they're unionizing. Your bunkmate once woke up with a rat sitting on his chest. They stared at each other for 3 seconds, then the rat walked off. Smug. Dominant. Like a mafia don checking up on rent. So you try to adapt. You develop rituals. You tuck your blanket in tight, like a tortilla wrap of desperation. You hang your rations from the ceiling with ropes like some kind of deranged nautical piñata. You even start leaving offerings, crumbs mostly, in hopes of appeasing whatever rat deities control your fate. It doesn't work. They take the crumbs and the spoon, and once your entire sock. Still you manage, mostly. You learn to recognize them by sound. There's the fat one who thuds when he runs, the scratchy one who nests near the salted pork, the mysterious silent one whose presence is only revealed by the fact that your toothbrush is always warm in the morning. You don't want to think about that one too hard. But hygiene? Forget it. There's no escaping them. They're in your food, your clothes, your dreams. You chew cautiously now, always bracing for that telltale crunch of regret. You inspect your boots before putting them on. You pat down your trousers like you're frisking yourself for a fugitive. And let's talk about disease. Because rats in the 1700s aren't just a nuisance. They're biological warfare in fur coats. Fleas? Check. Flea-borne illnesses? Double check. You're constantly one bite away from erupting in mysterious pustules or leaking out of orifices you didn't know you had. Still, the captain won't do anything. Why? Because rats are considered good luck. Seriously. Old sailor superstition says that rats fleeing a ship mean doom is coming. So if rats aren't fleeing, everything's fine. Just ignore the part where one chewed through a map and left a trail of droppings in the shape of a skull. The absurdity is endless. Once you caught 2 rats fighting over a compass. Another time, you swear you saw one wearing a pirate's earring. Could it have been wedged around its neck? Maybe. Could it have been fashion-forward rodent rebellion? Also maybe, and heaven help you if you so much as try to remove them. Your first attempt involved a makeshift broom and a bold attitude. You lost both. Your second attempt was poison. The rats didn't touch it. The cook did. He claimed it added tang to the porridge. Your final attempt was a truce. You left a note. Yes, to the rats. It was mostly gibberish and crumbs arranged in vaguely diplomatic patterns. They responded by eating your spare underwear. Eventually you surrender, not because you're weak, but because you're outnumbered, outmatched, and outwitted. You sleep lighter. You eat faster. You tell yourself the constant skittering around your ears is almost comforting, like lullabies, if lullabies had claws. So here you are. One more body among the crew, another unwilling participant in the ship's unofficial interspecies alliance. You don't fight it anymore, you just live with it. Like scurvy, or back pain, or the philosophical debate about whether the rats are the true rulers of the ship. And when you wake up one morning to find a rat gently gnawing on your beard, you don't scream. You simply nod and say, "Good morning, Captain Cheesebelly." Because on this ship you either adapt, or the rats will teach you how. You've endured storms, lice, a fistful of sketchy tattoos, and at least one incident involving a crab and someone's britches. But nothing. Not even a midnight bilge cleanup or the infamous salted meat stew incident prepares you for the sheer psychological collapse that occurs aboard a pirate ship when the rum runs out. It starts as a whisper. A casual comment muttered in passing as someone rummages through the supply hold. "That the last barrel," he says, voice too casual, like someone tiptoeing around a bear. You don't respond. You don't want it to be true, because if that barrel was indeed the last, you are officially sailing into the most dangerous waters imaginable, a sober pirate ship. Let's be clear, pirates don't drink rum because it's festive. They drink it because the water is lethal. The casks of fresh water on board are about as fresh as a medieval latrine. They're filled with green sludge, mosquito larvae, and enough bacterial content to be classified as a biological weapon. Rum, by comparison, is sterile, fiery, predictably flammable, a known quantity in an otherwise chaotic, foul-smelling universe. You've built your schedule around rum at dawn, to soften the shock of waking up next to a goat with a hat on. Rum at midday, to endure the blistering sun and the smell of your shipmate's mysterious foot rot. Rum at night, to forget all of it, or at least to hallucinate something better. So when the final splash hits the bottom of your tin cup, and you hear nothing but echoing despair, a kind of communal dread settles over the ship. It's not loud, not yet. It's a slow, creeping sobriety, like watching a bar fight begin in slow motion. Day one without rum. Optimism. Maybe there's more somewhere. Maybe someone stashed a bottle. Maybe the navigator, bless his cross-eyed heart, accidentally charted a course toward a port with a tavern. You all start checking your socks, your hammocks, under the goat. Nothing. Day 2. Bargaining. Crew members begin trading things they don't even own in exchange for a theoretical dram. Someone tries to ferment raisins in a boot. Another starts licking the walls of the rum barrels, hoping for a spiritual experience. The ship's parrot starts screaming help instead of pieces of 8. It's unclear if this is a coincidence. Day 3. Madness. You have never seen a man try to distill alcohol from seaweed before. It turns out you still haven't, because that man exploded his still and now has eyebrows that look permanently surprised. Another crewman swears he saw Poseidon offer him a drink if he just swam far enough out into the sea. He's currently tied to the mast for his own safety, chanting sea shanties in reverse. The captain, previously a model of drunk eloquence, begins issuing commands that make absolutely no sense when sober. "Raise the anchor," but emotionally, he shouts, then retreats to his quarters to have a stern word with his compass. He hasn't shaved in days. No one's sure if he's talking to the compass anymore or if the compass is now talking back. You? You're surviving. Barely. Your hands tremble. Your eyes twitch. Your sense of smell is coming back, a development you regret immediately. You can now fully appreciate the stench of rotting fish, unwashed linens, and whatever is fermenting in the corner of the galley. The world is too loud, the ocean too wet. You find yourself contemplating things like hygiene, accountability, and, worst of all, feelings. Pirate sobriety is not a graceful transition. It is a ship-wide identity crisis. You used to be confident, swaggering, a slightly slurred force of chaos. Now, you're just a damp man in a blouse, experiencing complex emotions and the scent of mildew at the same time. You miss the simplicity of a good drunken rage. The fighting begins around day 4, not over treasure or mutiny or even personal insult, but over deeply irrational things. Someone accuses someone else of stealing their shadow. A duel is declared over the incorrect folding of a hammock. One man starts hoarding spoons and refuses to explain why. The parrot now says, regret. By day 5, the crew begins to fracture. Factions form. The stern rum revivalists believe they can summon more rum by chanting ancient toasts. The galley brewers claim to have perfected a mash of rotting turnips and old boot leather. The deck suckers. They've taken to licking any surface that ever came into contact with alcohol, including the captain's telescope. You join the fence sitters, a faction committed to doing absolutely nothing except conserving energy and mumbling about dry mouths. You've invented a handshake that's just a prolonged sigh. By day 6, the hallucinations set in. You think you see a bottle bobbing in the waves. You scream, dive overboard, and realise it's a floating chamber pot. It's unclear whether this is better or worse. But here's the twist. Somehow, you make it. On the 7th day, land is spotted. Not a tavern, not a port, not even a fishing shack. Just a sad, lonely island. But on that island, in a pile of driftwood and questionable shells, sits a single bottle. Unopened, untouched, unbelievable. The crew rows ashore with the intensity of a prison break. You practically body surf over the oars. The captain weeps openly as the cork is removed. It is not rum, it is coconut milk, but the mere idea of hydration is enough to cause a spiritual reckoning. The ship is saved. Morale is restored. The parrot says, okay. Later, someone finds a real barrel buried under a pile of tarps behind the galley, forgotten in the chaos. It's half full. It smells divine. There are tears. There is singing. There is someone proposing to the barrel. No one stops him. The lesson here? Pirates are not built for sobriety. The ocean is dangerous. The crew is unstable. But remove the rum, and you remove the one thing holding the madness at bay. Now you know, and tomorrow you're on bucket duty, because the coconut milk did not sit well with the captain. The first rule of piracy is simple. Water is everywhere, and none of it wants you alive. That truth hits hard the moment the ship goes down. Maybe it was a storm. Maybe it was a reef hiding just beneath the surface like a smug sea serpent. Or maybe someone, hypothetically, mistook a drunken parrot's squawk for a navigational command. Doesn't matter. The outcome's the same. You're shipwrecked. 1 minute you were yelling at someone for spilling the rum rations. The next you're clinging to a floating barrel of fermented pickled herring, praying that the sea doesn't swallow you whole, or at least swallows you quickly. Salt water burns your eyes, your nose, your inner sense of purpose. Your boots float off your feet like rats abandoning a very specific kind of ship. There's no graceful way to survive a shipwreck. You're flailing, coughing, and swallowing enough brine to pickle yourself from the inside out. Dignity is the first thing to drown. Eventually you find land. Or rather, it finds you. Face first, dragged ashore by waves that treat your body like an old sock. You flop onto the beach like a half-boiled lobster. Your first breath of air is equal parts relief and sand. Welcome to survival, pirate style. Now the real suffering begins. You have no supplies, no compass, no rum. Your hair is a tangled net of seaweed, barnacle slime, and shame. Your clothes are soaked through and smell like betrayal. You're cold, wet, and somehow still sunburned. Every insect on the island takes your arrival as a personal invitation. The sand fleas form a welcoming committee. The mosquitoes throw a blood banquet in your honour. You try to start a fire. Pirates are not known for their wilderness survival skills, and neither are you. You stack damp sticks. You yell at the sticks. You bash 2 rocks together until one breaks and hits you in the shin. By nightfall, you're huddled under a leaf that's definitely not waterproof, gnawing on a suspicious fruit that tastes like regret and mild poison. Sleep does not come. The noises in the jungle range from potentially edible to definitely carnivorous. Something screeches in the darkness. Possibly a bird, possibly your own spirit leaving your body. You spend the night playing What Touched Me, with a parade of unseen creatures. Every rustle is a snake. Every drop of water is a ghost. Every passing breeze is probably judging you. Morning brings sunstroke. You drag your cracked lips to a stream and drink deeply, even though it tastes like warm algae soup and contains things that wiggle. At this point, intestinal consequences are just tomorrow's problem. You need hydration now. The jungle is a buffet of terrible ideas. You chew bitter leaves. You eat a bug on purpose. You discover a plant that makes your tongue go numb and your left eye twitch uncontrollably. You regret everything. But hunger doesn't wait for reason. It just gnaws at your belly like an angry crab. After 3 days, you smell yourself. Not metaphorically. Literally. Your armpits could be used as a chemical weapon. Your undergarments have become a petri dish. The sea salt and sun have fused your skin into a new type of crust. Birds start circling you, not as a warning, but as a hopeful omen. You try fishing. With what? A stick, a rope made of hair and despair, and the illusion of dignity. You sit in the shallows stabbing wildly at passing shadows. You catch nothing but self-loathing. At one point, a fish swims between your legs and makes direct eye contact. You could swear it smirks. Desperation grows, you find a crab. You chase it. It chases you. Eventually you win. Victory tastes like wet cardboard dipped in iodine. You cry a little. The crab doesn't. Then, one glorious afternoon, salvation appears. A ship. Not yours, of course. Yours is decorating the ocean floor. But a different one. A real ship with sails and everything. You wave, scream, set your shirt on fire. You look like a madman, which is fitting because you are one now. They pick you up. The crew is not thrilled. You smell like fermented despair and barnacle breath. But pirates are a superstitious bunch, and your tale, half delirium, half sea-stained ramble, is enough to convince them that you're either very lucky or possibly cursed. Either way, they let you aboard. Congratulations, you've survived a pirate shipwreck. You're back on a boat, back on deck, back to slop stew and lice inspections and the comforting creak of timbers. But you're different now. You twitch when you hear seagulls. You flinch at the smell of coconuts. You have flashbacks every time someone mentions a nice beach vacation. And at night, when it's quiet, you whisper to your new crewmates about the crab that watched you sleep. They don't believe you, but they don't laugh either. Because surviving the sea isn't just about not drowning. It's about not losing your mind. Or failing that, learning to live without it. So next time the wind picks up and the captain shouts to lower the sails, you grip the rigging a little tighter. You stare at the horizon with a 1,000-yard glare. And somewhere, deep in your crusty soul, you pray. Not for safety, but that if you go down again, you at least get shipwrecked somewhere without crabs. Let's get one thing clear. You're not in a world where doctors exist. At least not the kind with degrees or steady hands. On this ship, medical care is more of a collaborative group effort, equal parts guesswork, superstition, and blind optimism. If you bleed, you bleed. If something's broken, you tie it to something sturdier and hope for the best. And if you mention the word infection, someone might just think you're speaking French and knock your teeth out for it. There is no infirmary, no linen gowns. The closest thing you've got to a healthcare plan is a barrel of rum, a dull knife, and a crewmate with experience pulling teeth out using pliers he found lodged in a dead man's boot. You begin to understand the true horror of this system the day you stub your toe, or rather, the day your toe decides to take on a new personality. It's purple, it throbs, it smells like regret. But you keep going, because pain is just part of the ambience out here. That is, until one night, you wake up to find your big toe the size of a crab apple, and roughly the same colour as dried blood. It pulses like it has a heartbeat of its own. You poke it, it jiggles, you cry a little. You're told to report to the quartermaster, who doubles as the ship's medic. His qualifications include surviving 3 amputations and knowing how to pronounce laudanum. He takes one look at your toe, nods solemnly, and hands you a leather strap to bite down on. You ask what for. He says, "In case we run out of rum." Here's the thing about pain aboard a pirate ship. It's never subtle. The ship rocks, creaks, and groans like a wounded beast, and so do you. Except you're doing it because the surgery involves a rusty chisel, a candle, and the soothing sound of someone whistling shanties while sterilising tools in boiling seawater. There is no anaesthesia. There is no antiseptic. There is only rum. A lot of rum. You drink until the ceiling becomes the floor and the floor becomes God, and then you drink some more. Eventually your toe is lanced, or possibly just stabbed repeatedly, and wrapped in sailcloth soaked in alcohol. Someone hums a tune while they work. Someone else vomits from the smell. You survive. Barely. The toe doesn't fall off. Yet. You wear your limp like a badge of honour. Until someone reminds you that a proper pirate wouldn't have flinched. You retaliate by spitting in their soup. They retaliate by punching you in the good leg. Medical diplomacy, pirate style. But that's just the beginning. Because health isn't something you lose all at once out here. No, it's peeled away layer by layer, like old paint off a damp wall. First come the teeth, or rather the absence of them. Your gums swell. Your breath could strip paint. And then one morning, you go to chew a piece of stale biscuit and your molar simply surrenders. Plops right out. Lands in your stew. You consider leaving it there for the added crunch. You're told you've got scurvy, a word that sounds too jaunty for what it actually is. You're rotting from the inside out. Your skin bruises if someone looks at it too hard. Your joints ache like they've been replaced with rusty hinges. Your mood swings between violently irritable and haunted skeleton. The cure, citrus, which unfortunately is as rare on this ship as sobriety. Lemons are spoken of in mythological terms like unicorns or competent leadership. Once, someone claims they saw an orange on shore leave, and they're immediately accused of witchcraft. Instead, you're given fermented cabbage water, which might have once been sauerkraut, or possibly a prank. You drink it anyway. The alternative is dying slowly while your teeth drop into your lap like hailstones. Then there's the matter of parasites. At some point you accept that you're not one creature, but a moving ecosystem of smaller ones. Your skin itches constantly. Your armpits host something that buzzes. Your hair moves when the wind doesn't. You stop asking questions. The ship's remedy? A vinegar soak. You sit in a barrel for an hour while your crewmates laugh and bet on whether you'll faint from the fumes or drown in the barrel. You emerge pickled and vaguely clean, but only briefly. Within a week, the lice throw a reunion party on your scalp, and heaven forbid you get anything worse. Fever. Could be anything from sunstroke to ghost possession. Rash. Probably demonic. Seizure. Definitely cursed. Every symptom is interpreted through the lens of maritime folklore, bad dreams, and a fundamental misunderstanding of how the body works. One poor soul once got a splinter and ended up losing his arm just to be safe. Another had the hiccups and was buried at sea after someone decided he was possessed by a drowned monk. The only thing worse than being sick on a pirate ship is being very sick. That's when they start talking about putting you out of your misery. You suddenly find yourself very invested in pretending to feel better. You smile with blood in your mouth. You say, "I'm fine," while sweating through your boots. You limp with a spring in your step and tell everyone the weeping sore on your leg is just a tattoo that got carried away. Because dying on a pirate ship isn't dramatic or cinematic. It's not a valiant duel or a cannonball to the chest. It's a slow, itchy, oozy decline into pain, fever, and being mistaken for a bedroll. It's being buried at sea, wrapped in your hammock, and if you're lucky, they remember to remove your boots first. But until that day comes, You endure. You chew your stale bread, you sip your vinegar, you slap at the bugs in your shirt and hope the next wave doesn't knock you into the firewood pile. You pray, not to gods, but to lemons, and if you're smart you start hoarding garlic, salt and anything that might vaguely resemble a first aid kit. Because out here, the only thing between you and the grave is how convincingly you can say, it's just a scratch. And maybe, if the stars align and the fever breaks, you'll live to see shore again. Just try not to stub your other toe. There is a problem on board. A crisis. A mutiny in the making. Not because of gold. Not because of a captain's cruelty. Not even because someone forgot to toss the weevils out of the biscuit barrel. No. This, dear listener, is something far more serious. The rum is gone. Or rather, it's vanishing. A little less each day, quietly, suspiciously, like it's learning to walk away on its own. Now, you might think a missing drink wouldn't spell doom for a pirate vessel sailing the warm seas of the Caribbean. But you would be wrong, because rum, on this ship, is not just a beverage. It's currency, morale, medicine, toothache relief, cough suppressant, grief counsellor, and, on bad days, a sort of spiritual experience. The line between divine revelation and drunken hallucination is thinner than the hammocks, and now it's slipping away one gulp at a time. You didn't do it. You're not that foolish. The rum rations are locked behind a large iron-braced chest, watched by the quartermaster with all the paranoia of a starving raccoon guarding a dumpster. But each morning, when he unlocks the chest with a key he keeps tied to a neck rope and tucked into his armpit, the barrels inside seem lighter, wetter, more suspiciously depleted than they were the night before. The crew is panicking, not in a loud, flailing sort of way. No, pirates handle stress with style, that is to say, passive-aggressively and armed. The air becomes charged, accusations simmer under every grunt. You bump someone's elbow at the soup pot and they narrow their eyes like you've just proposed marriage to their parrot. The captain declares an emergency, not because he misses the rum, though he does, deeply, but because a crew that thinks it's being stolen from is a crew that will soon decide keel hauling is an appropriate form of customer service. And so begins the most dysfunctional investigation in the Caribbean. No magnifying glasses, no dusting for fingerprints. This is pirate justice. A whirlwind of shouting, finger-pointing and looking very intently at people to see if they look guilty. The cook is accused first because he always smells like he's hiding something. The carpenter is next because he was once seen alone near the barrels in 1722. Someone even points at the cat. You? You try to keep your head down. You drink your water. You smile politely. You absolutely do not mention that you've heard a suspicious dripping sound near the lower deck. You've learned better. Snitches get stitches. And in this case, likely splinters in the eyeballs as well. Eventually a search is ordered. The crew is made to line up. Hammocks are overturned. Barrels are sniffed. The goat is interrogated. You're patted down by a man whose hands are shaking so badly he nearly pats your spleen into a new position. They find nothing. And still, the rum continues to vanish. Now the whispers start. Not just about thievery, about curses, rum spirits, invisible drunk ghosts. Someone claims they saw a shimmering figure dancing near the hold. Someone else swears a barrel groaned in Latin. A man with only one eye begins painting warding runes on his boots. Another refuses to sleep near the rum anymore. The crew is spiralling, and then, one night, you hear it. A faint drip, drip, drip down by the hull. A sound that doesn't match the rhythm of the sea. You follow it, crawling through the dim underbelly of the ship like a very nervous barnacle. And there, behind a stack of damp rope and a suspiciously dented harpoon, you find it. A crack in the barrel. Not a theft. A leak. A slow, tragic hemorrhage of precious fermented hope. The rum isn't being stolen, it's escaping. You rush to tell someone, then pause, because now you have a choice. You could reveal the truth, calm the crew, end the hysteria, maybe even earn a promotion to person occasionally spoken to without spit. Or you could set a bowl under the leak, catch the drips, slowly, secretly, become the quiet king of forbidden rum. You wrestle with your morals for all of 3 seconds, the bowl goes down, but you're not greedy. You tell the captain the next morning, just after you've sampled your fair share. In the name of investigative accuracy, of course, for science. The leak is plugged, the barrels are reinforced, the crew is told a woodworm incident was to blame. Everyone cheers, the cook is given a chicken leg in apology, the cat is exonerated. But from that day forward, the captain insists on taste testing every rum ration personally, just in case. And you? You're watched a little more closely now, not because they suspect you did anything wrong, but because you walked through a ship-wide hysteria about missing rum with an unbothered grin and suspiciously hydrated eyes. They don't trust it. You return to your hammock swaying with the sea, already missing the midnight drip of stolen warmth. But you smile, because in the absurd, booze-soaked chaos of pirate life, surviving a scandal, or even benefiting from one, is just another rite of passage. And also, you may have hidden a second bowl somewhere. You're not saying where, but the goat keeps sniffing around that spot. Let's talk about your nose. Not because it's charming or majestic. No, your nose is simply the most abused, frost-bitten, sun-seared, wind-blasted piece of cartilage on this entire ship. You wake up, and the first thing you smell is someone else's feet. You go to sleep, and the last thing you inhale is the yeasty, damp bouquet of mouldy biscuits and bilge water. Your nostrils have become front-row spectators to one of the most grotesque natural experiments in human endurance ever attempted. Pirate hygiene, of course, being a bit like pirate law, more of a loose agreement between desperate men to not actively die in each other's filth. At least not right away. There are no baths on board, not real ones. There are bucket splashes, there are torrential downpours, there are the occasional waves that slap you with salt water when you're least prepared, and there's the hope, the faint, fading hope, that someday, somewhere, you'll step into a freshwater stream and scrub until your skin remembers what it feels like to not be marinated in brine and oil. But that is not today. Today you're scrubbing your teeth with a fraying rag dipped in rum and muttering to yourself while avoiding eye contact with a man who's currently shaving his armpits with a broken shell. Your mouth is a horror story. Your gums are inflamed. Your breath could fell a seagull. And don't even get started on your tongue. That poor organ has been coated in a film of dried meat residue, rotten citrus, and approximately 3 different strains of old-timey bacteria. You try to scrape it off on the side of the ship, but even the barnacles seem disgusted. Hair care? That's a cruel joke. Your scalp is less groomed and more ecosystem. Lice are not just expected, they're practically family. You name a few. You have no choice. They're the most reliable companions you've had in weeks. To control the itch, you scratch with whatever's available. A fork, a nail, a seashell, a spoon, the corner of a barn door. You once saw a pirate try to burn them out with a candle stub. He no longer has eyebrows. Or friends. Your clothing is a crime scene. The shirt you're wearing was probably white once. Now it's an ambiguous smear of browns, greens, and salt-stained patches of what you hope is just fish slime. Your trousers are crusted in salt and other less identifiable substances. Your boots? They smell like regret and fermented eel. One is missing a sole. The other contains a very surprised crab. Even the cleaning supplies are offensive. The communal rag, yes, one communal rag, is passed around like a sacred artifact. It has never been washed. It is damp. It is legendary. You have touched it twice and seen things that cannot be unseen. Your fingernails are tiny Gothic tombs, blackened crescents packed with grease and the occasional barnacle chip. You once found a fish scale lodged under one. You don't know when it got there. You don't know when it left. Now, let's address the elephant in the outhouse, the ship's latrine system. It is, in essence, a plank. A special plank. One that juts out over the sea and offers you the thrilling experience of dangling your backside into the howling void while hoping a rogue wave doesn't baptize you mid-process. Toilet paper does not exist. Instead, you're encouraged to use rope, seaweed, or improvise materials. One man once used a page from a stolen Bible and swore he heard thunder immediately afterward. Infections. Oh, they're everywhere. Sailors whisper of the dreaded salt rot, a charming little condition where your skin becomes so cracked and chafed from the salt and sweat and rubbing and more salt that entire chunks begin to flake off. There are boils, there are mysterious rashes, there is a pirate whose toe may be growing a second toe. You smell bad. Everyone smells bad. But the terrifying part, you've gotten used to it. The stink is no longer offensive. It's atmospheric. It's a part of the ship, like the creak of the boards or the call of gulls. If you were to suddenly bathe and lather yourself with fragrant herbs, the crew might throw you overboard for sorcery. And yet, somehow, there are rituals. Not regular, logical rituals, but strange little habits that pass for cleanliness in this floating cesspool of dreams. Some pirates chew mint or chew on cloves to freshen their breath, which mostly results in clove-flavoured halitosis. Others wipe down their blades religiously, but let their own wounds fester unattended. A few even scrape their tongues on cannonballs because they heard it scrapes the sin away. There's even a superstition about washing your face with rainwater during a storm. It's said to wash away the devil, or at least the seagull droppings. You tried it once. It mostly washed away your will to live, and yet, in spite of this overwhelming festival of filth, you persevere. You tell yourself it's fine, that everyone's nose whistles when they breathe, that everyone has at least 2 fungal colonies currently colonizing their ankles. Because here's the real kicker. Back on land, the clean people aren't doing that much better. Bathing once a season, sharing chamber pots, living next to pig pens and throwing sewage into alleys. Being a pirate may be disgusting, but it's not uniquely disgusting. It's just honest about it. So you scrape your tongue, you comb your beard with a fork, you dodge the communal rag like it's cursed, and you live. One smelly, itchy, absolutely revolting day at a time. Welcome to pirate hygiene. May your nose never know peace again. You'd think that being a pirate would be all wild romances and steamy encounters in exotic ports, wouldn't you? You've seen the paintings, you've heard the songs. Somewhere between yo-ho-ho and a bottle of rum, there's usually a curvy barmaid, a dramatic kiss, and a perfectly timed sunset. But let's just get this out of the way. You haven't kissed anyone in months. Your last attempt at romance was 3 ports ago, and it ended with someone throwing a ladle at your head and yelling, "Don't touch me, you smell like boiled boot." Fair. You did. Because love, real, human, squishy love, is hard to come by when your personal hygiene is a war crime, your schedule is dictated by wind, and your living space smells like pickled farts. But that doesn't mean pirates didn't fall in love. They did. They just did it differently. Take your own situation, for example. You haven't seen a woman in weeks, or a man who isn't half feral and covered in rope burns. Your concept of flirting now consists of sharing your better chunk of biscuit or letting someone borrow your flea comb, which is surprisingly intimate when the crew has a collective tapeworm. There are no flowers here, no candlelit dinners, just fermented cabbage, grog, and 2 people trying not to vomit while sitting shoulder to shoulder in a hammock meant for one. So how did pirates find love? Well, it depends. Out at sea, the options were limited. The crew was overwhelmingly male, especially in the 17th and 18th centuries. Some ships did have women aboard, but not many. And those who were present were either posing as men to join the crew, working as cooks or medics, rare, or passengers who were usually off limits, either by code or under threat of mutiny. But that didn't stop relationships from forming. Not at sea. Not in that kind of intimacy, that tight proximity, that endless sweaty closeness where you're eating together, sleeping shoulder to knee, and occasionally sewing each other's wounds shut with palm needles and rum. On pirate ships there was a real thing, a documented, socially recognised thing, called matelotage. It wasn't exactly marriage, but it wasn't just bunkmates either. It was a partnership, a pirate civil union. You and another crewmate would agree to share your belongings, split your loot, look after one another, and, in many cases, share a bed and more. It was practical. It was affectionate. Sometimes it was romantic. Sometimes it wasn't. But it was a kind of chosen family, a recognition that, in a brutal, lonely world, having someone in your corner mattered more than most would admit out loud. And there you are. No wedding, no priest, no ring. Just two pirates with matching lice infestations and a silent agreement to split the rum and not stab each other in the night. That's romance at sea. When you do make it to port, everything changes. The ship stinks less, but only by comparison. And the crew, wild from weeks of deprivation, hits the taverns and brothels with all the subtlety of cannon fire. Port cities were used to this. Women and men who worked in these establishments knew exactly how to handle pirates. Charge up front, keep your boots on, and never ever fall for the one who plays the concertina. But for a few gold coins and a bath, if you're lucky, some pirates did find temporary comfort. Not just lust, but warmth, conversation, maybe even a moment of softness. You'd pay for an hour, stay for 3, and talk about the stars or your plans to buy a goat and retire inland before your teeth fall out. They'd listen. They might even laugh. And in that hour, you weren't just a pirate. You were a person again. Of course, it didn't last. It never did. Some pirates tried to maintain relationships on land. Lovers, secret families, the occasional scandalous letter passed through back channels. But most couldn't hold on to anything that fragile. Not when you're gone for 9 months. Not when your income depends on robbing other people. Not when you smell like brined despair. Still, there were stories. Whispers of pirates who retired and settled down, bought a little land, married the tavern girl, had kids, grew vegetables, lived long enough to be boring. And then there were the ones who couldn't let go, the Matelots who sailed together for years, buried each other's treasure, and died within weeks of one another in a hurricane off Barbados. The kind of love story that never made it into the ballads. Too tender, too real. Your own situation, complicated. You've got a hammock partner who snores like a dying walrus but always saves you a spoonful of stew. You share your tobacco. You watch each other's backs during port raids. And last week, when you got splinters in your foot from that cursed latrine seat, they cleaned the wound and muttered something that might have been, "Don't die, idiot." You didn't say anything. You just nodded. And somehow that felt like something. Because pirate love isn't about flowers or poetry. It's about survival. About holding on to someone. Anyone. Who doesn't mind your smell, your scars, or the fact that you once screamed at a flying fish because you thought it was your dead uncle's ghost. So you lie back in your hammock, cramped and itchy, but slightly less alone. The ship creaks. Someone farts nearby. You hear a soft snore and realise it's not coming from your side. You shift. You sigh. You close your eyes. And you fall asleep with the faint, improbable feeling that someone cares whether or not you wake up. You always thought pirate fights would be glorious. Steel flashing in the sunlight, daring leaps from mast to mast, a dramatic sword clash followed by a witty one-liner and a triumphant pose atop a pile of defeated enemies. That's adorable. In reality, you're currently hiding behind a barrel of wet beans while someone screams and a cannonball the size of your hopes just tore a hole in the starboard hull. It smells like gunpowder, fear, and urine. And not all of it is someone else's. Welcome to pirate combat. It starts before the fighting ever does, with spotting a ship in the distance. You squint across the waves, praying it's fat and slow and preferably unarmed. A merchant vessel. Something with sugar or silver, or if the gods are kind, barrels of salted beef that haven't been colonised by fungus. If it's a navy ship, you run. If it's another pirate ship, you think very hard about your life choices. But if it's prey, that's when the chaos begins. You're sent below to help prep the cannons, which by the way are not sleek death machines. They're rusting tubes of unpredictable violence that explode more often than they fire cleanly. Your job is to jam powder into a hot iron pipe, shove in a cannonball using a stick that looks suspiciously flammable, and pray the fuse doesn't backfire into your chest. Once you're in range, it's thunder. Explosions shake your teeth loose. The deck trembles. Smoke pours in thick as soup. Someone is always screaming, sometimes from injury, sometimes because they just got soot in their eye and wanted attention. You're deaf, coughing, and loading the next shot while someone above yells to boredom like that's a normal, sane idea. Boarding is where it gets personal. You climb over the side like a lunatic, weapon in hand, lungs full of gun smoke, and leap onto another ship full of people who really, really don't want you there. Fights happen fast and filthy. Forget the fencing lessons. You're swinging a cutlass in one hand and maybe a boarding axe in the other, trying to avoid splinters, gunfire, and someone stabbing you in the liver. Blood slicks the deck. Screams fill the air, teeth fly, eyes water. You once saw someone bite another man's ear off just to win a headbutt contest. There's no honour, no duels, just survival. You hit, you get hit, you trip. You kick someone in the knee and then hit them with a belaying pin because it's the closest thing in reach. And there's more than just blades. Pirates love granados. Crude, hand-thrown bombs made of clay or iron filled with gunpowder and nails. You light one, toss it, and hope it lands somewhere that isn't your own foot. There are blunderbusses too, short fat muskets that fire anything you can stuff into them. Lead shot, nails, marbles. One guy once loaded his with a spoon and took out a man's shoulder. The recoil nearly launched him into the sea. Sometimes you're fighting in knee-deep water. Sometimes the enemy surrenders before you even board. Other times, it turns into a full ship-wide brawl, with people swinging from rigging and ducking behind masts like the world's angriest game of hide-and-seek. And then, silence. Eventually it ends. One crew gives up, or dies, or leaps into the sea to swim for it. You stand there panting, bleeding from somewhere you can't quite identify, looking at the wreckage. Splintered wood, burnt rope, smoke rising. Someone's missing a toe. Someone else is looting earrings from a corpse while humming a sea shanty. You wipe your sword on a piece of sailcloth and look around for your hat, which vanished mid-fight and may now belong to a seagull. Victory? Kind of. Now comes the looting. Rifling through barrels, smashing open crates. If you're lucky, there's coin. If you're unlucky, it's barrels of molasses and someone forgot the spoons. And then you deal with the wounded. There's no medic, just rum, rags, and the guy who once stitched up a goat and now claims he's a surgeon. You lie on the deck, biting down on wood while he pours boiling water on your arm and mutters, "This'll sting a bit," like he's not about to saw through muscle with a knife he sharpened on a rock. And what about prisoners? That depends on the captain. Some get cut loose, some get pressed into the crew, some get marooned with a bottle of water and a prayer. You try not to think too hard about it. Justice is slippery out here. You limp back to your ship, exhausted, sore, hungry, covered in grime, soot, and someone else's blood. You collapse into your hammock and stare up at the creaking boards, every muscle singing, every nerve buzzing. This is pirate life. Glory? Maybe. Profit. If you survive. But mostly it's chaos, noise, pain, a kind of adrenaline-fueled madness that leaves your ears ringing and your boots sticky. And you'll do it again tomorrow if the wind is right. You wake up sore, itchy, and mildly surprised to still be alive. It's calm today. No storms, no cannon fire, no chase on the horizon, just endless ocean, and the creaking lullaby of a ship that is, against all odds, still afloat. The kind of day that, in theory, should feel restful, a rare moment of peace. But you're a pirate, which means even your day off is one long to-do list written in sweat, salt, and the faint odour of fish stew leftovers fermenting under someone's hammock. You swing your legs over the side of your rope cradle and land with a splat on the damp deck. Your feet are immediately soaked. It rained last night. Again. And someone forgot to cover the powder barrels. Again. You sigh. Time to work. Because pirate life, for all its drama and violence, is mostly made up of chores. There's no ship steward, no cleaning service, no enchanted mop and bucket that scrubs the deck while you nap dramatically on a coil of rope. No, that's your job. All of it. Step 1. Scrub the deck. You join a miserable line of crewmates, each clutching a brush, a bucket, or a vague expression of spiritual defeat. The sun is already hot. The water is already filthy. And someone, you're not naming names, but you know who, threw up behind the mainmast again. You swab. You scrape. You rinse with seawater that makes the wood even saltier than before. You mutter curses under your breath as you attack barnacle slime with a wire brush, and the enthusiasm of a man being punished by Poseidon himself. Next comes the rigging check. You haul yourself up into the tangled spiderweb of ropes and sails, your hands already raw from yesterday's splinter incident. Up here, the wind is stronger, the gulls are meaner, and the rope burns are inevitable. You tighten knots, recoil lines, patch tears, and try not to look down, or sneeze, or vomit. You climb down sunburned and slightly dizzy. Congratulations, it's still before noon. Now you haul barrels, because pirates don't just steal barrels, they rearrange them endlessly. Rum, biscuits, powder, water, all must be checked, rechecked, counted, and stored in a precise, constantly shifting system that only the quartermaster understands and everyone else curses loudly about. Then it's sail repair. You sit cross-legged on deck with a giant needle and yards of coarse canvas, sewing like your grandmother, if she had scurvy, blisters, and a permanent groin itch. Every gust of wind threatens to rip the patchwork apart again. You fix it anyway. You don't get paid more for this. You barely get paid at all. After that, rope duty. Always more rope. You untangle it. You recoil it. You oil it. You tie it to things. You trip over it. You dream of strangling the man who keeps uncoiling it just to make a hammock fort. Lunch happens somewhere in the middle of this, assuming the cook hasn't had a mental breakdown and hurled the stew overboard again. You sit cross-legged near the galley fire with a bowl of lukewarm something and gnaw your way through it like a sad hyena. The afternoon? Oh, you're fishing. Not for fun. Not with a rod and a charming smile. You're dangling a net full of salted meat scraps over the side, hoping to catch something that moves. Fish, crab, octopus, divine intervention. Anything edible. If you succeed, you might get an extra bite at dinner. If not, well, hope you like Weevil biscuits. You do some sparring too. A few rounds of pretend swordplay on the open deck. It's technically training, but mostly it's an excuse to stab something that isn't rope or your own feelings. No armour, no rules, just two sweaty, half-sober pirates clashing blades, while the others place bets and laugh when someone trips over a mop. And when you're not doing all that, you're fixing stuff. Barrels leak, planks rot, sails rip, pulleys jam, cannons shift, rats chew through things they legally shouldn't. Every day something breaks. Every day you fix it, or at least tie a rope around it and pretend it's fine. And then, miracle of miracles, you get an hour of free time, which you spend doing the only sensible thing, collapsing. You lie flat on the deck, hat over your eyes, letting the sun bake your skin like a lizard on a hot rock. You scratch. You pick at something unidentifiable on your sock. You listen to the distant sound of waves, creaking wood, and someone snoring through a mouthful of tobacco. You might whittle a bit, or mend your shirt, or clean your blade with a rag so stained it's probably considered a biohazard in 3 ports. You talk, you laugh, you sit in silence and think about the last time you touched dry land without swaying slightly and muttering nautical metaphors. Night falls slowly. The crew gathers for dinner, a grey, oily stew with something chewy in it that no one dares identify. You sit shoulder to shoulder with men who once bit off someone's ear and now pass the salt like it's afternoon tea. You eat, you wipe your mouth on your sleeve, you belch. Then comes watch duty, one of the worst phrases in pirate vocabulary. You draw the short straw and spend 2 hours pacing the deck with a lantern, watching for rocks, ships, or terrifying sea monsters that definitely don't exist, except for that one time last year when Jenkins swore he saw a glowing squid with eyes like spoons. Eventually you're relieved. You climb back into your hammock, sore, salt-stained, and profoundly exhausted, only to realise someone else's toe is resting on your pillow. You adjust, you sigh, you scratch, And just as you're about to drift off, you hear the cry from above. "Ship on the horizon! Here we go again." It starts with the pigeons. Your captain has begun speaking to them. Not out loud, not at first. Just little gestures, a tilt of the head, a conspiratorial whisper as they flap overhead, a nod of agreement with something no one else hears. At first, you ignore it. Everyone goes a little strange after 30 days at sea. The sun bakes your brain. The salt dries your soul. You once tried to talk to a barnacle for 2 full minutes before realising it was just your own toe with a blob of tar on it. But this is different. The captain has taken to naming the clouds. He's started calling the sails her skirts, and refers to the cannonballs as his tiny iron children. During last night's dinner, he refused to eat stew because he swore it was giving him side eyes. And still, no one says anything. Because on a pirate ship, the captain is law. Judge, jury, spiritual guide, fashion critic. If he says the ship's haunted, you nod and sleep with one eye open. If he claims the moon is spying on him, you squint suspiciously at the moon. If he starts baptizing the rats and promoting them to quartermaster, well, you clap and play along. You don't challenge a mad captain, you improvise. But the signs are getting worse. The other day he stood at the prow for 6 hours straight, whispering poetry to the sea and throwing biscuits into the waves as tribute. He's begun wearing 2 hats at once and has declared war on spoons. Last week he tried to navigate using a map drawn in soot on a fish. And still, somehow the ship keeps going. Because here's the secret. This isn't the first time. Captains crack all the time. The pressure, the isolation, the constant threat of betrayal, mutiny, naval pursuit, storm, scurvy, and waking up with a knife in your shoe. It breaks them down like a slow leak in the brain. Some go loud, raving, screaming, biting their own sleeves. Others go quiet, detached, glassy-eyed, lost in imagined worlds of order and logic where the cannonballs are loyal and the mast sings lullabies. Your captain has chosen a whimsical descent, which is frankly better than the last one, who tried to marry the anchor and drowned during the ceremony. The crew adapts. You begin translating his orders creatively. When he shouts, "Set course for the second sun," you quietly adjust the helm 2 degrees west. When he screams that the fish are plotting against him, you nod, pretend to interrogate a mackerel and suggest switching to salted pork for safety. The first mate becomes a full-time interpreter, part sailor, part therapist, part diplomat between reality and whatever soap opera is playing in the captain's head. The quartermaster starts hoarding rum, just in case negotiations go south. And you? You develop the pirate's most valuable skill, pretending everything is fine, even when it's not. Even when the captain orders a crew-wide reenactment of Julius Caesar using barnacles as cast members. Even when he declares that nobody may speak on Wednesdays, or use the letter R unless it's rolled dramatically. Even when he swears the compass is possessed by a Dutch witch with feelings for him. You go along with it, because mutiny, that's messy, dangerous, complicated, and because deep down, everyone's a little mad out here. The sea does things to you. It stretches time. It erases land. It replaces logic with superstition. You start believing in omens, bad luck, haunted harpoons, and ghosts that only show up when you eat beans on a Tuesday. So when the captain starts holding secret meetings with a dead parrot nailed to the mast, you just tighten the sails and keep rowing. It's not that no one cares, it's that everyone understands. And there's an unspoken rule aboard pirate ships. You let the captain be mad, as long as he's still lucky. If the loot keeps coming, the storms keep missing, and the ship stays afloat, let the man wear a fish on his head. Let him baptize the spoons. Let him scream Shakespeare at the waves while you quietly steer around the reef he's pretending is Atlantis. But the moment luck runs out, that's when the whispers begin. Not yet, not today, but soon. A quiet word from the boatswain, a shared glance over grog, a quick inventory of how many knives are within arm's reach, just in case. Because pirate captains don't get retirement plans, they don't get therapy, they don't get sabbaticals, they get 2 endings, glory or mutiny. For now, you play along, you salute the parrot, you offer tribute to the cannonballs, you nod when he claims the ship is being followed by invisible British warships made entirely of mist and sarcasm. Then you climb into your hammock, scratch your salt-bitten ankles, and drift off to the sound of your captain loudly interrogating the moon for crimes of betrayal. Sleep comes slowly, not because you're afraid, but because the moon might actually be guilty. You wake up sweating, not because of a nightmare, though those are frequent, but because the air hasn't moved in 3 days, not even a breeze. The sails above hang limp like wet laundry, and the deck beneath you feels hotter than a smithy's furnace. The sea is flat. Too flat. A smooth, shimmering sheet of blue that stretches to the horizon like a polished mirror. Not a ripple, not a wave, not even a single dramatic seagull to break the silence. Just the creak of wood, the occasional groan of a sailor's joints, and the soft, unmistakable sound of 100 people slowly losing their minds. You're stuck in the doldrums. It sounds poetic, like something from a sad pirate ballad. Oh, the cruel doldrums stole me soul and left me spooning biscuits with me tears. But in reality, it's less poetic and more sweaty existential crisis. Because when there's no wind, there's no movement. The ship just sits, floating, baking, creaking like an old man's knees in the heat. There's nothing to do but wait, and that's the most dangerous game of all on a pirate ship. At first, everyone pretends it's fine. You take the time to catch up on repairs, you remend sails that don't need mending, you re-oil rope that was already oiled yesterday, you polish the cannon until you can see your filthy, sunburned reflection. Someone tries whittling. Someone else attempts to play a sea shanty on a broken fiddle that only knows 2 notes, shriek and please stop. But then comes the boredom, and boredom on a pirate ship is worse than boredom anywhere else, because there's no escape, no tavern to wander to, no books to read, no internet, no hobbies that don't involve rope or knives or casually punching your shipmate in the arm until someone starts bleeding. You've already cleaned your nails twice with a fishhook and braided your beard into a shape that vaguely resembles a pelican. The heat makes it worse. It turns tempers brittle and sweat glands suicidal. The air is so still that every smell becomes a permanent houseguest. The reek of feet, the sour waft of old pork fat, the damp mildew hiding in the cargo hold that may or may not be sentient by now, and the constant, ever-present ghost of unwashed pirate. You try to nap, but the air below deck is so thick with heat and human soup that you feel like you're being slowly boiled in your hammock. You try fanning yourself with a hat. You try drinking more water. The water is hot, tastes like regret. Then the weirdness begins. Someone paints eyes on the water barrels so they have someone to talk to. Another sailor insists he saw the ocean blink. The cook starts mumbling about cursed stew and tries to spice it with bits of old rope for texture. One man spends 5 hours in a staring contest with a crab that doesn't exist. You just sit on deck chewing a stick, watching the horizon, wondering if the sun has always looked that judgmental. And the worst part, the wind teases you. You'll feel a faint gust on your face, just enough to lift a corner of the sail, and then it's gone. Like the ocean is playing a cruel joke. You check the sky. Still no clouds. Just endless blue, like you've been trapped in a painting made by someone who hates boats. The captain announces a ceremony to summon the wind. He wears a crown made of seaweed and sings to the compass. A crewmate bangs 2 pans together. Another tosses dried peas into the sea like they're sacred offerings. You play along. Why not? Nothing else has worked. Later, someone suggests catching a fish for good luck. The bait rots before anything bites. By day 4, everyone's sweaty, sun-stunned and suspicious. You're convinced Jenkins is hoarding the last dry biscuit. He swears it's a sock. The sock has teeth marks in it. You don't ask. By day 5, the games begin. Arm wrestling, spitting contests, rat racing, knife balancing on toes. One man challenges the wind itself to a duel. Another tries to start a poetry circle but gets booed when he rhymes grog with log 4 times in a row. People are sleeping in strange places now. curled in the sailcloth, draped over barrels, nested under the cannon like sweaty barn owls. You find yourself staring at clouds and imagining what they'd smell like. You'd give up your hammock for a single chilled grape. And the worst thing is, you start to doubt the wind will ever return. Rationally, you know it will. Eventually. Probably. But it doesn't feel that way. It feels like time has stopped. Like you've entered a painting that forgot to end. Like the world is broken and nobody told the sun to move on. But then, late in the night, when most of the crew is snoring in puddles of their own boredom, you feel it. The tiniest breath of air. It brushes your neck like a whisper. The sails shift. A rope stirs. Someone gasps. Then, it's gone. You wait. The wind teases again. A gentle push. A sigh. Then another. And suddenly, movement. The sails catch. The ship creaks with purpose. The water parts. The horizon stretches again. The stillness shatters like a fever breaking. Pirates leap from hammocks. Whoops and cheers echo across the deck. One man weeps into his boots. Someone else punches the wind just to make sure it's real. You just smile. And for the first time in days, you sleep. Not because you're exhausted, not because of the heat, but because the ship is moving, and the world finally feels like it remembered how to breathe. It begins with rum, which is admittedly how most things begin on a pirate ship. Bad decisions, sea shanties, minor stabbings, philosophical debates with coconuts. But this time is different. Because this time, you've just completed a raid. A proper one. Swooped in on a fat merchant ship packed with sugar, textiles, and barrels of molasses. The crew surrendered. No bloodshed. The loot was plentiful. The wind was perfect. You're back on your own deck now, groaning under the weight of stolen cargo, grinning through sea-stained teeth, and every man aboard is riding high on success, and the possibility, however distant, of not dying for another week. Which means it's time to celebrate. And on a pirate ship, celebrate means chaos. There are no rules, no speeches, no formal invitations. Someone just cracks open the first barrel of rum and yells, "Party!" and then it all spirals from there. You're handed a mug that may or may not have been used earlier to store nails. You drink anyway. It burns going down, but at this point, that's the flavour you expect. The fire spreads to your chest, your arms, your brain. You grin. Around you, the deck transforms into a floating tavern of absolute nonsense. Someone's playing the fiddle. Badly, enthusiastically. The tune is half sea shanty, half aggressive shrieking. A few men link arms and attempt to jig, which quickly turns into slipping, falling, and yelling at the floorboards. The cooks banging pots together in a rhythm that could be music or could be a cry for help. Two crewmates are engaged in a spirited game of headbutt until one surrenders. A third is trying to teach a crab how to dance. Someone starts a conga line. You're pretty sure that was invented 200 years later, but no one seems to care. A barrel is rolled across the deck for a makeshift race. Another is turned into a drum. Another is being used as a seat by a man who's just proposed marriage to a mop. You drink more. You laugh. You sweat. You cheer. You briefly consider doing a backflip and wisely decide against it. Your foot catches on a rope. You fall sideways into someone's lap and are immediately blessed as king of the biscuits. You're crowned with a tricorn hat dipped in pickle brine. The night roars. Someone lights a torch for ambience and 5 seconds later tries to juggle it. On a ship, made of wood, covered in rope, next to the gunpowder barrels. This is technically where things go wrong. The torch hits a sail. It smoulders. Someone throws a mug of rum at it to put it out, which is the liquid equivalent of tossing gasoline onto a campfire. The flame whooshes. The sail erupts like an angry marshmallow. Screaming ensues. Panic? Yes. Strategy. A number of buckets are fetched. Water is flung. Someone heroically smothers the flame using his own shirt, which may be the first time he's taken it off in a year. It's unclear whether the fire goes out from the water or from embarrassment. Either way, the sail is now slightly more whole than fabric, but the mood unshaken. Because this is normal. Pirates party like they fight, messily, loudly, and with at least one limb catching on fire. The celebration continues with a dance circle around the slightly charred spot where the torch landed. Someone pours molasses on it and declares it holy ground. You end up playing dice with a man whose only rule is I win. You lose everything, which is fair since your only wager was a splinter you'd been saving for luck. Someone breaks into the supply of pickled onions and starts handing them out like gold. You eat 4, regret follows swiftly. As the night wears on, things start to slow. The singing turns slurred. The dancing turns to swaying. The laughter fades into murmurs. You find yourself sitting cross-legged near the helm, watching a man try to teach a seagull how to swear. The rum is gone. The molasses is sticky. Your pants are wet for reasons you'd rather not examine. You lie back. Above you, stars blink in the warm dark. The sails flap lazily in the night breeze. The fire is out. The chaos is settling. One man snores softly into a coil of rope. Another is cuddling a mop that now wears the hat of an admiral. You close your eyes. Your head is spinning. Your tongue tastes like burnt socks and vinegar. But your belly is warm, your hands are sticky, and for the first time in days, no one is yelling. You drift off to sleep to the quiet creak of the ship, the occasional belch, and the soothing sound of someone vomiting into a barrel 2 decks below. It's not elegant, but for a pirate, it's peace. The first sign is the flag. It rises slowly over the horizon, a flutter of colour you almost don't notice in the haze of morning sun. At first, you think nothing of it. Just another ship, another sail, another floating barnacle farm baking under the same endless sun. But then someone calls out, a sharp cry from the crow's nest. You hear the word that tightens every gut on deck. Navy. Suddenly everyone's moving. Voices shout. Ropes are pulled. Sails unfurl. The wheel creaks violently as someone wrenches the helm. You're not giving chase anymore. You're running. And you already know deep down it's not going to be fast enough. Because this ship, she's fast, but she's tired. Her sails are patched. Her hull leaks in places you try not to look at. And the Navy ship chasing you, she's clean, tall, and cutting through the sea like she's got a vendetta and nothing better to do. You feel it in your bones. That slow, spreading dread that starts in the belly and rises up behind the eyes. You grip a rope. You curse the wind. You wish you'd thrown your hat into the sea and vanished while you had the chance. But it's too late. They're gaining. And then comes the shot. The deep, echoing boom of a warning cannon, not aimed to hit, just to say, we're here and we're done playing. There's panic. Some of the crew shout to fight. Others yell to surrender. You freeze, caught between 2 equal and terrible truths. If you fight, you die. If you surrender, you might live. The captain hesitates, just for a second, and that's enough. The second shot hits the mast. Wood splinters. Rigging snaps. A sail crashes down in a tangled heap. The ship lurches sideways, half deaf from the impact, groaning like a wounded animal. The order is given, surrender. Hands go up. Flags come down. The sea falls silent again, except for the sound of your heart beating somewhere in your throat. They board you quickly. Clean uniforms, polished boots, faces that look like they shave regularly and don't sleep in hammocks next to a barrel of cabbage stew. Their weapons are loaded. Their eyes are sharp. You try not to look guilty, but you're barefoot, sunburned, covered in rope burns, and still wearing half of a pickle barrel as armour. Not exactly innocent by appearance. They read off charges: piracy, theft, violation of trade routes, assault on merchant ships, illegal possession of gunpowder, failure to pay customs duties on rum, unlicensed cannon usage, general disrespect toward maritime fashion norms. You're shackled. The iron is cold, heavy. It bites into your wrists with an indifference that feels personal. You've worn ropes, you've worn bruises, but chains are different. Chains mean you're not free anymore. You're herded onto their ship, a clean, orderly monster that smells like polished wood and smug superiority. You're thrown into the brig. No hammock, just a damp floor, stale air, and the faint smell of someone else's panic. Days pass. You're fed hard bread and bitter water, questioned, counted, watched. You're paraded into port like a trophy, filthy, ragged, blinking in the sudden glare of civilization. The crowd gathers. Some cheer, some boo, some throw things. One woman spits and shouts, "You stole my husband's hat!" And honestly, that does sound like something you'd do. And then come the trials. You're brought before a judge who smells like ink and arrogance. You're not given a lawyer, just a long list of charges and a very unimpressed court. The trial lasts less than a day. They call you a menace, a blight on trade, a disgrace to your country, your mother, and the entire concept of nautical decorum. You try to speak. They don't care. Your crimes are already decided. The sentence is read aloud. Death by hanging. The crowd gasps. You stare. And here's the twist. It's not personal. Not really. The judge doesn't hate you. The Navy doesn't hate you. The people don't even know you. They just hate what you represent. Freedom, defiance, a world without rules. And so they decide you have to swing for it. You're brought to the gallows. It's a warm morning. The sky's cruelly beautiful. The birds sing as if nothing strange is happening. You're led barefoot through the square, your shackles clinking in rhythm with your heartbeat. The platform looms, the rope dangles, and you swallow, but then, just before your name is called, something strange happens. Another man is dragged forward, a mutineer from the Navy, they say, a traitor. He goes first. The trapdoor falls, and the crowd turns. They've had enough. They start to leave. Bored, sunburned. A hanging is exciting until it's not. The magistrate checks his watch. The guards check their pay. And before you know it, your execution is postponed. Then delayed. Then forgotten. Days pass. You're moved to a prison. Then a work camp. Then a coastal fort where you repair walls and haul cannonballs in silence. It's not freedom, but it's not death. And one night, months later, you escape. You steal a rowboat. You vanish into the fog. You paddle for miles, ribs aching, arms trembling, your mind still echoing with the creak of the gallows beam. Eventually you reach another ship, another crew. They ask your name. You lie. They ask your story. You smile and say, "I'm just looking for work." And you're back. Not because you're fearless, but because the sea is the only place where you know who you are. You lie awake in your new hammock, wrist still sore, heart still beating, the stars overhead wide and endless. You got caught. You almost died. And now, you're free again. For now. It doesn't start with thunder. No dramatic storm. No vengeful cannon fire. No ghost ship rising from the fog with flaming sails and an unpaid grudge. It starts with a leak. Tiny, unimpressive. Just a wet patch on the floorboards near the bow. You notice it one morning while scratching your knee and trying to decide if your breakfast biscuit is edible or alive. You poke the spot. The wood is soft. You shrug. Everything's soft on this ship, including your standards. But by afternoon it's worse. The floorboards are weeping. The bilge is rising. Buckets appear. Mops are recruited. The quartermaster mutters something about swelling planks and "it'll hold." You nod, even though "it'll hold" is pirate code for "we're all doomed, but let's pretend we're not." By nightfall, the sea is inside the ship, not a puddle, a presence. You feel it in your socks. You hear it in the groaning timbers. You smell it. Not the sharp sting of fresh brine, but the heavy, sour stink of soaked ropes, dead rats, and something long fermented crawling up from the bilge like it's been waiting for this. The ship is tired. You know the signs. She's listing just enough to make the hammocks feel crooked. The sails sag with damp despair. The rats, smart little devils, are already on the move, abandoning their cosy mould nests and skittering for the rigging. You ask the wind to change. You ask the sea to calm. Neither one listens. In the dead of night, the hull gives a sound you've never heard before. A pop followed by a groan so low it vibrates in your chest. Like the ship has finally exhaled after holding it in for years. Then comes the tilt. You're thrown from your hammock into a puddle that shouldn't be there. Shouts ring out. Someone rings the bell. Not for dinner, not for watch, but the one reserved for when things go sideways fast. And oh, they do. Water floods in like it's late for something. Barrels bob free, crates slam into knees. The deck groans, then cracks. Somewhere, a cannon slips its rope and rolls across the gun deck, flattening anything in its way. You don't panic, you move. You grab what you can, a plank, a barrel lid, your lucky sock, and scramble above deck just as the lower half of the ship fills like a bathtub with too many bad decisions. Men are yelling, some are bailing, some are praying, some are fighting over a door that clearly won't float anyone. The sail catches the wind one last time, jerks violently, and rips in half. The mast groans, then snaps. It crashes through the main deck like a falling tree made of splinters and shattered dreams. This is it. You find a barrel, empty, buoyant, blessedly round, and hug it like a long-lost lover. You leap. The water is cold, then colder, then everything is noise. The ship groans again, and then, with a final shudder, the kind of creak you feel in your soul, she goes under, not fast, not clean. She dips stern first, dragging canvas, rope, and crates of spoiled stew into the deep. The deck vanishes. The figurehead disappears. The last visible piece is the captain's chamber pot, which floats for an unsettling amount of time before quietly tipping over and sinking. You're now alone, floating, drifting. Adrift on a warm sea beneath a quiet sky, legs dangling in brine, arms wrapped around a rum-stained barrel. No compass, no sail, no crewmates, no ship. Just the gentle slap of waves. The moon, smug as always, and a faint ripple of laughter in the back of your head, because of course this is how it ends. You think about everything that brought you here. The raids, the lice, the stew, the fire, the hammocks full of snoring feet. The time Jenkins swore he saw a sea witch wearing a bonnet made of jellyfish. The boredom, the pain, the ridiculous joy of dancing on a leaking deck with a spoon for a crown. And now, this, quiet. You close your eyes. Not because you've given up, but because the sea is rocking you gently. And for the first time in weeks, no one is screaming or singing or trying to juggle cannonballs. You breathe. And somehow, despite everything, the wounds, the stink, the splinters in places you can't describe politely, you're still alive, still floating, still here. The stars shimmer overhead. The tide nudges you towards something. You don't know what. Land? Another ship? An exceptionally large crab with a kind heart? Doesn't matter. You made it. You're no legend. No hero. No singing skeleton in a cursed cave. Just a survivor with sea salt in your ears and half a biscuit in your pocket. And maybe that's enough. You sigh. You drift. And as the sky slowly lightens over the endless blue, the world, finally, begins to go quiet. The ship is gone, the sea is calm, and you, crusty, sunburned and somehow still afloat, are drifting gently beneath a sky full of stars that don't care how bad you smell. You've survived hard tack, cannon fire, sea madness, and something that definitely wasn't stew. You've danced on burning decks, held your breath through a latrine emergency, and floated face down in rum dreams more than once. And still, here you are, just a pirate bobbing softly in the dark, finally at peace, if by some miracle you're still awake, and not snoring into your pillow with one foot sticking out like a forgotten sail. Feel free to like this video, and let us know in the comments what part of pirate life was most horrifying, or weirdly relatable. And if you've already drifted off somewhere deep below deck in a dream full of salt air and biscuit crumbs, then we'll leave you here, floating, breathing, and finally blessedly quiet, as the sea grows still, and the world slips softly out of sight. Good night, pirate.